Welcome to this video. By the end of it, our enemies will have health bars above their head like this, which automatically rotate to face towards the camera as we move around them. If you look at this guy on the top here, his health bar is facing the camera, and they have the ability to effectively take damage, but we're not implementing damage yet. We're just showing enemy health. So I will see you in there. Let's start this enemy health bar stuff. Well, firstly, I'm going to start it by turning off the gizmos, I think, because we're not dealing with gizmos here. I'm also going to organize the enemies in my hierarchy. So create an empty, call it enemies, reset the transform for reasons mentioned before, and drag the current enemies in. So that's just a bit of a tidy up. I'm also going to drag game canvas towards the top. So I've got camera, game canvas, player. I'll put the directional light up, player, enemies, and then I think I'll put environment at the bottom, just because that makes sense to me. No particular reason. All right, so what do we want to do? We're going to start by importing the custom package that I've provided you with this lecture called Enemy Health Bar V2. Going to just import it. It's got 3 elements, and then we'll look and see what they are and see how they work. Cool. Well, first thing we're getting is a red error. That's because there is no enemy script yet. So the first thing we're going to need is an enemy script. How do we manage that? Well, we can duplicate the player script and pop that in the enemies folder. And then we need to just be a little bit careful when we do this. So I'm going to name it enemy as a script here. But then when I go into the script to rename the class from player to enemy, we don't want to do that using the refactor tool, because if we do, it will rename it in both files, and then we'll have 2 scripts with 2 class definitions for enemy, one in the player script and one in the enemy script. So you don't use the refactor tool. Do not go Control-R, Control-R. Just rename enemy. Which one? Yeah, the enemy script to enemy. So rename in the new enemy.cs that you created, which was a copy of the player, just name it enemy. Simple as that, the class. All right. Very simple. So what we're ending up with is an enemy class that's identical currently to the player class. It will diverge from that as time goes on, but that's fine as a starting point. And remember, it's okay to write code twice before you start thinking about refactoring. Don't refactor and pull out common threads until the 3rd time, because you don't know for sure that they're not very different. And the enemy and the player might well be very different. So if we try and play now, then the game should just run, I hope. Once it realizes that that enemy and that player class both exist, there you go. But of course, no UI, because we haven't really wired it up yet. Wicked. So what are these things? Firstly, we've got an enemy canvas prefab. I'm just going to drop that in the scene and see what it is. Enemy canvas. If I just bring it up a bit. Look what it is. It's a world space canvas. We need it world space because the enemies run around, and we want the UI to be stuck to the enemy itself. Now, we also need some way of it rotating to face the camera all the time, but we have a script for that. We'll deal with that later. So let's see what the canvas is. It's just a canvas at the top level. I haven't added anything to that canvas. And then subbed to that, we have a health bar, which is again a raw image using the player health bar image. I'm actually going to change the name of that now from player health bar to simply health bar, because we're using it in more than one place. So I'm just going to rename my player health bar and player health bar mask PSD files in my assets under camera and UI to simply health bar and health bar mask. All right. So I do that immediately, you see it. All right, so further information on this enemy canvas. What do we got? It's got a health bar texture, exactly the same as the player for now. You could, of course, create different health bars for enemies and the player, and you probably will want to. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. And then it's got a health bar script against this health bar object. So what does that do? Well, before we explore it like this any further, it just instantiated randomly into the scene. I'm going to instantiate it a different way. I'm going to grab an enemy, let's say this guy, and I am going to look at the enemy health bar, or the enemy UI rather, is the first script we're going to get. We're going to look at the enemy UI script first. Look, I've got some notes. It says for this enemy UI script, you want to add a UI socket transform to your enemy. Okay, let's just do that. Then we get an enemy. Remembering we're working on an instance here. Create an empty child called UI socket. Why? Because this is a way of positioning the UI, the root of the UI. Where does the health bar appear? I'm going to move that up above his head just roughly for the moment. Okay. So the script says add a UI socket transform to your enemy, attack, need to fix that, attach this script to the socket. So this script being enemy UI, okay, let's just do what it says, attach it to the socket, link to a canvas prefab that contains NPC UI, or just to a canvas prefab, let's just say. Edit that up a little bit. So link to a canvas prefab. Well, there's the enemy canvas prefab. Now, the reason we need to do this is that we don't have nested prefabs in Unity. As I've said here, this is to get around Unity 5's lack of nested prefabs. What I have is an enemy with a UI socket on it saying this is where I want you to spawn the canvas. But we can't have a canvas that can be changed in a single place and it be on the enemy. If I want the canvas to be a prefab, then it can't be nested under the enemy prefab. So what we're doing here is we're putting a script on. Let's see what happens at runtime now. We play the game. Look in the scene view at the enemy, and under the UI socket, this enemy UI script, if we look at the enemy UI script, what does it do? Well, it has a tooltip, firstly. So if we hover over this, what that does is it tells us what this field does, or at least it would if we weren't in play mode, I think. Let's just try that, see the tooltip in action. There you go, the UI canvas prefab. So it has a tooltip, and then there's another annotation. It has serialized field, and you can take the space away. It doesn't matter. The spacing here doesn't matter at all. You can have it all on one line, but I think that's ugly. You can have it like that, or you can have spaces. I don't care. So we initialize it to null, and then we drag in the enemy canvas prefab. We've done that. It has a camera, i.e. a camera to look at. The purpose of this script is to keep the UI element facing the camera. So it goes and finds the main camera, instantiates the enemy camera prefab at the position of this game object, which is the UI socket, with no particular rotation. And then every frame, it goes and looks at the camera. That's what those two things do together. So the net effect of that is if we look in the scene view, this thing doesn't look like it's looking at the camera. But if we look in the game view, what will happen is that this thing will be rotated to face the camera once we've got the rest of our issues sorted out. All right, so what's this object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Enemy.health as percentage. So the enemy health bar script is the next thing we need to think about. So we have a UI socket. When we play the game, the UI socket spawns a new game object, the enemy canvas clone, and it has a health bar on it. And then the health bar script itself is trying to go and find the raw image. It goes and finds the enemy up the hierarchy. So from here, it looks up and finds the enemy. Boom, 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 boom. Find get component in parent of type enemy. And then it looks for a health bar raw image on the same game object here. All right, so that's what that's doing. And the problem we're having here is that we have not yet on the enemy we're working on attached this enemy script. So we need to attach that to the enemy. Now, in all this work, bear in mind that I'm making changes to a particular instance of an enemy, this guy here. I've not applied this back to the prefab or created a new enemy prefab yet. I'll need to do that a little bit later. I've only got a large enemy prototype, and I'm going to overwrite that in a bit, okay? But right now, we're just bringing it all together. So let's try again. I've put the enemy script on the base of the enemy. Let's see what happens now when we run. Let it get used to everything. Okay, that's good. So we have an enemy. We could turn our gizmos back on. I'm sure they would still work. And that enemy's health bar is facing the camera wherever we go. A little bit hard to see. I could zoom in, but it's always facing the camera. It's like billboarded to the camera. It doesn't look like it is in the scene view. Well, it kind of does if you imagine where the camera is. But the perspective can be quite strange. But you see the effect in the game view is that the thing is just above your head. So that's what on the UI socket, the enemy UI script does. It just instantiates an enemy canvas and then continually every frame faces it towards the camera. And then on the actual health bar element of that canvas, which we briefly looked at, and it's basically exactly the same as the player one, this guy here, this enemy health bar script, well, that's responsible for updating the health of the enemy. So if we were to go to the enemy and change his maximum health points, you see, watch very carefully, it's a little hard to see because of the resolution, but as I change the max health points, just like with the player, the enemy's health changes, okay? So that seems to be working, which is pretty cool news. Now, it does mean, of course, I've skipped over a few of the things in here. We've imported the enemy health bar, we've explored how the package works, we have created an enemy and wired it up. So what I need to do is to just apply this back to the prefab, and then I want you to challenge you to do this in a unique way for your own game. So this prefab here, I can apply the changes to enemy back to the prefab, and including the UI socket is all gone. So the enemy prefab now has changed. So now if I play, all of the enemies have health bars over them, you see? Let's check that this is also working over in Rick's Village in a read-only fashion. Let's not change Rick's Village, but let's just play the game and make sure that his enemies have a health bar. Now, one of them does and one of them does not. Why is that? Because we have the idea of a large enemy, but do we have another enemy? Let me have a look. Enemy. No, we only have a large enemy prefab at the moment, and it looks like if we look at Rick's two enemies, this guy, if we select prefab, is linked to the enemy prefab. That's fine. They just look different. Large enemy doesn't have itself an avatar, so that's why I didn't see them as both enemy and large enemy. Maybe I'll name them enemy and enemy large. Yeah, you go. It's updated the thumbnail. A little bit of a bug in Unity. So we have enemy and enemy large. Now, which one of those two did I work on and add the UI socket to? Only the enemy, not the enemy large. So how are we going to centralize this information so that I've changed the enemy, but I also want things to change on the enemy large? So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a command decision at this time that this is crazy having things in two places. I'm going to delete the enemy large prefab altogether, accepting that that will rip a guy out of Rick's scene, and then suggest that what we do is we just have a single enemy prefab, which should work fine. And then I've left some glasses. Look at that. That's funny. We've got Ethan's glasses floating in midair here. Where are they? I just need to find his glasses somewhere. Enemy large we still have in the scene. Okay, so I'm going to have a single enemy prefab, and we are going to suggest that Rick uses just that one for now, and that we scale that, and that messes up his animation. But that makes our life a lot more sane in terms of knowing where we're making changes to the enemy, especially right now while we're rapidly changing this enemy. So if we go over to Rick's scene, then his other enemy, I'm afraid, would have disappeared. But the way he can get that back is just drop in not a player, but an enemy. Oops, I just moved the player 1 second. Player goes back into player. Drop in an enemy there, and then if you want to scale it, well, then you can scale it, and it's just linked to the same prefab. Okay, so that's how you get your large enemy back. Play the game in Rick's scene, and you see that we have an enemy strangely rotated and nicely scaled, but they have health bars and they're working. Cool. So I will change Rick's scene in this case because I know that he's not making any changes at the same time as me right now. And we basically have got enemy bars going. We have a single enemy prefab, and enemies can effectively take damage, and so can the player, in that we have health points. They're private right now, but we'll deal with that shortly as to how we actually attack. So congratulations on getting this far. What I want you to do now is to add your health bar. To succeed in the challenge, it wants to look different to ours because you're building your game, not ours. It should update with the player's max health changes. We're not making the actual health public, so we are making the max health a serialized field which you can change in the inspector, so you can see the effects of that. Make sure that's working properly. Make sure you understand how this functions, what those two scripts do, and screenshot should be shared in the discussions forum. We'd like to see what you've done with your health bars. So unleash your creativity a little bit. You don't have to use the same PSD files that we're doing. You can create separate health bars, but again, don't commit too heavily to an art style in the project just yet. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.